This is Rudy Giuliani, and I'm back with Rudy's Common Sense, another episode, and we're with another hero of September 11. This is Joe Dunn. Joe, at the time of September 11, was the deputy police commissioner. But Joe had a very distinguished career in the police department. So on September 11, when he was taking the actions he was taking, it was backed by years and years of experience and success, like some of the others that you've heard from, like Joe Esposito. And that's one of the ways the city got through that maybe people don't focus on. So it's a great pleasure to have Joe here. And I'm going to have Joe describe a little bit of how you became a police officer, quickly, your career, and then we'll get to September 11th.
I became a police officer in October of 1969 at the urging of my dad, who wanted me to get a job. And
how old were you then, Joe?
21.
Oh, you were big.
Yes, I had just graduated from college, and I was kind of enjoying life and having a good time, tending bar on the side.
Dad wanted you to work.
Dad wanted to put an end to that. And so I had taken the police test in January of that year, and they called me in October, and then I went in and I went through the police academy.
And the year was?
1969, October 24th, 69.
So Lindsay was the mayor.
Yes, he was.
Right.
Yes. I went to the 75th precinct upon my completion of my
Tell us where
academy.
that is.
East New York, Brooklyn, toughest precinct in the city.
You have to know that Joe eventually, when we go forward, turned around Brooklyn North.
Yes.
With his unbelievable command of that borough command. But go ahead.
Thank you.
So you started off there.
I started off in the 7-5. I worked there for
that covers what?
East New York, Brooklyn, which is on the Brooklyn-Queens border.
So it's one of the most dangerous, one of the most difficult parts of New York City.
Yes, it always led city.
Like really right up on the top, murder, rape, everything.
All of the major crimes.
And drugs.
They were right there, and drugs, of course. Well, it was all fueled by drugs at the end of the day. So I worked there, and then I went into the narcotics division after about 5 years in the 7-5. I went to narcotics, served there for 5 years, was promoted sergeant, worked in the 2-8 in Harlem for 2 years, and sometime in the 104. I got promoted to lieutenant, and then to captain.
No, you took exams.
Oh, yeah, yes.
You took exams to become a sergeant?
Yes. So I worked my way up through the ranks, through the competitive exam system. When I became a captain, I was assigned as the executive officer in the 8-1 precinct in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, again back in Brooklyn North. So 2 years after arriving in the 8-1, I was made the commanding officer of the precinct. A short time later, I was promoted to a deputy inspector and transferred to the 7-5, where I started my career.
Tell me about September 11 now. So normal day, you wake up.
I get up a little bit early because there's a primary, and I wanted to vote before I went into the office because you never know what happens when you get to work. And I wanted to make sure that I cast my ballot. I think it was important. So I went over to my local voting place. I was still in a cast. I was on crutches. Yeah, so I voted, got in the van, and we were on our way to Manhattan, to my office at One Police Plaza. I had a meeting at around 9 o'clock. I was talking to George Grasso, the Deputy Commissioner of Legal Matters, when Dennis, my driver, in front says, "Hey, boss, I'm hearing something on the radio about a plane crashed into the World Trade Center." I said, "What else do they have?" And just at that time, we're going into the tunnel. So at that time, there was no Midtown Tunnel.
Midtown Tunnel. Okay.
There's no communication. So we get out on the other side, and I said, "What's going on, Dennis?" He said, "It sounds like a plane crashed into the south tower of the north tower of the Trade Center." I said, "A big plane, a little plane, Piper Cup, what do you know?" He said, "They're telling me it's a big plane." My mind told me that it was a terrorist attack. I'm not a genius or anything. I just thought it was.
Yeah.
Because as you know, there was so much conversation around a terrorist attack. John O'Neill, who was the director over at the FBI and a man that you knew very well, who died on 9/11. He kept telling me, I hear the jungle drum beats, he used to tell me.
I know.
I stopped the jungle shit, John. Can you tell me what's going on? No, I can't. Okay. But
And
there's a lot of noise.
one of my close friends and former assistants was the director of the FBI, Louis Freeh.
Yeah.
And he's the one who got me to close down. Remember, we closed down the courthouse, whole area around it. We increased the security around police headquarters, and we closed off City Hall.
Yeah.
And that was because we had that trial going on. And
Yes.
the FBI warned me, and they explained it was Al-Qaeda, bin Laden. They're doing a lot of tax overseas. They may come here. So we got to do this. I didn't want to do it because you always get criticized for closing it down.
Yeah.
But I did it. And so I can't say we weren't expecting something, but certainly nothing like that.
Oh, who could have imagined that? So when I got out to the other side, I said to Dennis, "Get me down there. You know, let's get down there." So he went down Second Avenue. We went down with the siren blasting and so forth, and we worked our way down. And we came to Vesey Street, and when I got to Vesey Street, there were fire equipment was all over the place. I tried to get into Building 7 for the emergency management office.
Right.
That was blocked to me. So I told Dennis, make a left, because I saw a command vehicle at Church and Vesey, a PD command vehicle. So I said, let me get over there. So I said, I stopped the car. I got out. I put on a jacket. As I'm putting on the jacket, I hear this tremendous roar and an explosion. And my mind told me that it was a secondary explosion in the North Tower. That's what I thought it was. Okay. Debris started falling down, so we ran to the Building 5, which was right on the corner there for protection, and stayed there until the debris stopped falling. A couple of pieces hit the vehicle that I was in. I saw some burning what looked like airline parts to me on the ground right there on Vesey Street. We stayed in the building for a while, holding people back from getting out because there was debris falling.
So now for sure terrorist attack.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah. Because now I'm hearing on the radio, they just hit the South Tower. I said, holy shit, what's happening here? So I saw Joe Esposito on the corner of Church and Vesey near that command vehicle. So I went over to Joe and we quickly began to talk about, what are you doing, Joe? Joe, as you mentioned before, is the chief of department.
Right.
He's in charge of all operational commands in the agency. And I wanted to help him, help him think this through.
Yeah.
But he's right up on his stuff. Joe knew his stuff. He's had as much experience as I had in these matters, and he was on. We got the task force coming here. We've got he's telling me what he's doing. We're beginning to lock down the city. We're doing all kinds of things. All right, what hold back on some of the emergency service. They may not be through with us. I'm thinking. I said, Joe, this may be just the beginning. If they can put two airlines into two buildings. The two buildings they aimed for, they were capable of doing anything, as far as I was concerned.
Yeah.
So while I'm there with Joe, I'm looking up at the building, and I'm seeing debris fall to the ground. And I'm thinking, well, and I'm seeing it. I said, well, no, that's not debris. Those are people. And I was affixed to it for, I don't know, it was probably just moments, but it felt like an eternity.
Oh my God.
And I watched these people just. It was raining people down onto the ground.
How many did you see?
I had to see a half a dozen people, maybe more. I didn't want to look anymore.
I saw one when I was walking toward Pete Gansey at the fire department command post. It's the thing that really triggered me that this is much worse than ever before. I actually watched this man, and like you, it felt like it was an eternity, but it was probably 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And I watched this man. He was making his decision. I mean, he was way up there, but I could see him on the windows. And I was starting to think, don't jump, you're going to kill somebody. And he jumped. He didn't. I saw him come down. Yeah. And then after that, I can't even count the number.
I stopped looking. I said, I can't focus on that. I've got a job to do. I just said to myself, forget that.
Yeah,
forget
exactly.
Forget it.
But it gave you a different sense of what this was about, how bad it was.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I thought to myself, I wonder if I'm going to survive today. And I said a little silent prayer, that I said, please don't make me make a decision that gets somebody killed today unnecessarily, And and it's at that time we hear from Bernie Kerrick, who's with you, and he's asking for us to meet him. And that's when I met you inside of Barclay Street. And you, yes, indeed, I saw you on the phone to the White House.
Time to take a short break. How much equity do you have in your home? 50,000, 100,000, more? Cybercrime experts are alerting homeowners that the more equity you have, the greater the chance foreign and domestic criminals will come after you. Title theft is one of the fastest growing crimes. Home Title Lock, America's leader in home title protection, is alerting homeowners they could already be a victim and not know it. Here's how it goes down. First, cyber thieves search hundreds of public databases for high equity homes. Next, they pull your home's title that's online. They forge your signature stating you sold your home, and they take out loans using your equity. You're not covered by insurance, your bank, or common identity theft programs. Protect your most valuable asset. Register your address now to see if you're already a victim and receive a complete title history of your home, a $100 value free. Go to HomeTitleLock.com. That's HomeTitleLock.com. Thank you for returning.
As you recall, we locked down the city. We closed the bridges and the tunnels and the access routes to the city. We kept the roads clear so that emergency equipment could arrive expeditiously and safely into the city, and we did that. And we began to strategize about how are we going to meet any additional threats that might come our way. But at some point in time, you finished your conversation and you got up and you said that you needed to address the press so that they could get the word out to the public and that you were to keep them calm. And I wasn't thinking of a public address at the time, but it's brilliant. That's your job. You're the mayor, and you were strategizing the right way. You had to reassure the public to, we're here. We're trying to get our arms around this. We're going to get through this. You'll be okay. And I think that was really something that you really wanted to do, and it made so much sense to me when you said that had to be done. But as we were leaving Barclay Street, as I know you recall, someone yells, "Get down!" We hear a huge rumble and roar, and the building comes down. The South Tower comes down. Again, I didn't know when somebody said the building's down, and I'm imagining that the top half of the building may have fallen.
What everybody
that's
thought.
what I thought.
It was actually the guy I heard was Espo, and he yelled the tower came down.
Okay.
For hours, I thought he meant by tower the top.
Yeah.
But I also couldn't understand how it did that much damage, because almost immediately the streets were filled with black, like within a minute.
When we finally worked our way out, as you recall, we were kind of trapped in the building.
We were trapped in the building, worried about getting out.
Yeah.
When we finally got to see the street, it looked worse.
It was a gray shroud that was over the city. That clear, perfect day that we started out at was now gone. It was a dusty gray city. Almost a couple of inches of soot was on the ground. It was flying through the air. Papers all over the place. People wandering around like zombies in shock. And it was hell on earth when we got out there. You decided to go north up to City Hall with the press, and there are some iconic photos of you and the team heading north on Church Avenue. I went back south to Church and Vesey just to check on my people as best I could. I wasn't going to be any help to you or the commissioner at that point. I went down to Church and Vesey, and I saw some cops there, and some of the images there were locked in my head. I saw one young police officer. She was just covered head to toe in debris, and I had seen her earlier in Building 5, and she never abandoned her post. I think I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "I'm all right." She was kind of in shock. I knew it, but I'm saying, she must have run for cover and got cover, but now she's back. And I said, "Listen, you need to leave. Go. Are you okay?" She's, "No, I'm okay." I don't know her name. I know she was a young police officer. There were several others there with her as well. I said, "Look, let's evacuate. Take some people with you." There were very few people left down there.
Right.
Although we did see some people so confused that they were walking south on Church Street back into the rubble. We had to turn them around. So I guess we did that for 10 minutes ago. So my guy said to me, "Listen, boss, do you hear that? That's that's the North Tower. It's creaking. It's coming down, just like the South Tower. And I said, well, let's just make sure we've done all we can here. Okay. Yeah, I don't see anybody else, boss. Let's go. So they commandeered a bomb squad vehicle, which was pretty big, and they told me, well, look, get in. So
the tower coming down now is closer to you than the other tower.
Yes.
The North
Yes.
Tower.
Yes.
So you're a block
Yeah.
block and a half closer.
100 yards probably.
Yeah.
Maybe closer.
Yeah.
Maybe closer to the building. I get in the vehicle, and no sooner that we got in the vehicle that it came down. You could hear it. Boom, 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 boom. Remember that sound?
And were you moving at the time?
Yes, we were in the vehicle, moving very slowly because you couldn't see. We were moving very slowly up Church Street, But then we hear that, that sound it made when it was going down. Mm-hmm. Some crazy extremists say those were explosions. That was nonsense. It was the building falling in on itself, and it went boom, 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 mm-hmm. all the way down. And it was eerie. And then
you heard it, but you didn't see it because you
didn't see it. No, we didn't see it. I heard it, but I knew it was coming down.
Yeah.
But now the black smoke is upon us. No more gray smoke. It's this black, dark as night stuff coming down. And I was fortunate enough to be in the vehicle. It consumed us,
and what street,
but we were able to get out.
What street? You remember what street you're on?
I don't remember. We were maybe 2 blocks north on Church Street.
Oh, on Church Street. So
on Church. Going north on Church.
Right. Time to take a short break. Big tech monitors us, censors us, deplatforms us. Conservatives have been helpless to do anything about it until now. On Getter, you can talk with friends and family and express your political beliefs without fear of Silicon Valley liberals coming after you. Join Getter, the social media platform that supports free speech and opposes cancel culture. Getter is led by former Trump advisor Jason Miller, who saw what big tech did to President Trump and decided to fight back. Getter is the fastest growing social media platform in history, with over 1.6 million users and growing, including prominent conservatives like Mike Pompeo, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Steve Bannon. Join Getter. It's in the App Store, the Google Play Store, and at Getter.com. Longer posts, longer videos, sharper and clearer pictures, and unlike the Silicon Valley oligarchs, Getter will never sell your data. Send a message today. Join Getter. It's time to cancel culture. Thank you for returning.
When we finally got out of that area, I returned to police headquarters and went immediately to the command and control center on the 8th floor. Mm-hmm. It was fully manned. There were people there from all agencies. We were kind of a backup to the OEM, as you recall, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. So and you were less than a mile from.
Oh yeah.
I mean, these people stayed there.
Well, we had to make a decision when we went in there.
Yeah.
My folks said to me, said, "Look, do we need to evacuate the building?" And I spoke to Joe Espo over the phone, mm-hmm. and I said, "Joe, look, what's going to be is going to be. We're the only semblance of a command center mm-hmm. that's still operational. Mm-hmm. We need to stay here. Right. I don't. Well, we might be a target. Well, we might not. Let's just stay here." So we ordered the evacuation of all non-essential personnel from the building. I said, "Everybody get out. That is non-essential." And I let the various agencies decide who was critical and who wasn't. And most of the people left the building. And we began to work there, and I stayed there for, almost the rest of the day, because now all of the people who wanted to help us began calling in the state police, mm-hmm. New Jersey State Police,
right.
Nassau County, Suffolk County, tremendous amount of help offered. And the New York State Police, Jim McMahon was their superintendent. He was particularly helpful. I spoke to him. He was a friend. And you knew him, he was a big, tall, skinny guy, mm-hmm. a good guy. I said, "Look," he said, "what can I do?" I said, "Well, what do you got?" That was they all said, "What could you do?" My next question was, "What do you got?" And I said that to some army general that called. Right. He says, "What can I do for you?" I said, "What do you got?" So Jim took his resources, and we decided that we were going to lock down south of Canal Street, and that's what we began to do. And the state police were instrumental in that, in terms of using their resources to lock that down for us. And Nassau County offered to help. I think they went up to the United Nations. So we were trying to coordinate the assistance that was coming in,
and you were bringing back cops into
yeah.
every precinct, right? I mean,
we
basically had the whole department.
Yeah, we had these in the can, Mr. Mayor. These are our operational plans,
right,
in the event of emergency. So all leaves were canceled. Everybody was called back in. We went to 12-hour tours, which creates an additional manpower pool for all of the things that you practice for, and we've done in the past. Some personal things began to happen during the course of the day there. I got a knock. I was in the executive conference room with Rudy Washington was there too, by the way, from your office.
Yes.
I get a knock on the door, and one of the police officers outside says, "Listen, there's a John Vigiano that needs to talk to you." And I said, I looked out and I saw John Vigiano. Now, John Vigiano.
Did you know John?
I did, because his son worked for me in the 7-5.
Okay. Did you know him when he was a police officer?
No. This was the father, who's the firefighter.
Oh, the firefighter.
Firefighter, the dad. So John is outside.
So
and
John had two sons. One
Correct.
was in ESU, and the other was in the fire department.
Exactly. I go out to see him, and I said, "What's up, John?" He says, "Commissioner," he said, I can't get a hold of my boys. He said, "I spoke to Joe last, and he was on his way over to the World Tramp, but I haven't heard a word from them since. What can you tell me?" I said, "John, our communications there are poor. You know, we think we've lost some people. We're trying to get our arms around that. I know the fire department has lost a lot of people. I'm being honest with you." I said, "But I can't tell you where anyone is right now." You know, and it hurt, because I knew this man. He was a good man. His only two sons, one a cop, one a firefighter, and they never survived that day. So it was things like that. And then during the course of the afternoon, we were getting a lot of calls from the wives and family of the missing ESU guys. You know, it was an easier process for us, because our numbers were smaller in terms of those who were missing, and we were able to get our arms around that almost immediately.
Right, you did a great job, because the families, when we brought them into the family center,
yes,
the families were very, very, I'm not going to say happy, but the families are very satisfied with it. Yeah. And it caused a problem with the firefighter families, because the fire department couldn't possibly do what you did. At one point, they thought they had 600 dead. It ended up 373.
I promised to give them a briefing twice a day. I gave a morning briefing, and I gave an evening briefing every day for weeks. And they stuck with us, most of them. They got a lot of value out of it.
How they doing now?
You know, every year,
20 years later, I know you keep in touch.
I exchange Christmas cards.
Yeah.
Coughlin's daughter is a cop. Joe Vigiano's two boys are both cops.
Of course.
And Marines. Grandpa made sure they went into the Corps. So these guys are both Marines. Poor John died, as you know. He succumbed to cancer. He was a great man, by the way.
He was a great man.
Yeah, he was a great guy. He visited the injured soldiers for years and years.
Well, I think he understood that they were carrying on. I remember talking to him about this at some point during the Twin Towers. Raised all that money for the police officers and firefighters. He helped us make decisions about the distribution of it. And he was one of the first people that said to me, you know, those people that are going over to Afghanistan, they're carrying on the war that my son was first killed in.
Yeah.
My sons were first killed in.
Yeah.
He had that sense. He had
had a sense of history, and he could understand the continuity and what was occurring.
How do you look at it now, 20 years later?
Well, you know,
how do you deal with it, and then how do you look at it?
You know, I think about it a ton. I'm sure you think about it every day.
Yeah.
You know, those days go through my mind all the time. I'm a little disappointed that we weren't able to accomplish more as a country with with getting to the core problem and getting to the people we needed to get to. I think that, I remember the days after 9/11. There were about 30 homes on my block in Queens, and every single house had a flag. Every single house had an American flag in front of their house. And they were there for months and months and months. And 20 years later, mine is the only flag that flies out in front of the house. People just learned to accept it. We started calling it different things. The tragic events of 9/11, the loss of life. No one calls it the slaughter of the innocent. And no one describes it as it was for what it was.
They started. They
our attack.
It was an act. It was like Pearl Harbor. It was an act of war against the United States. And our guys.
Yeah.
I always believe that our guys that were in the building, particularly, stood up so well that they restored the spirit, because the people attacking us they didn't just want to kill us, they wanted to destroy our spirit.
Absolutely.
They thought we were weak people, we put our head down, and instead you get stories of this tremendous heroism, like the Vigianos or Stephen Siller, who has tunneled the towers.
Yes. And
I think that inspired people, that there was a defiance. Let's fight back. Damn it, we're not going to let them do this to us. And that somehow seems to be gone. I think also the Taliban being in charge of Afghanistan again is like a blow right in the head.
It's confounding to me that we're at the point we're at now.
I can't tell you, Joe, how much I admire you.
Well, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
You were just the right. A lot of you were the right person in the right place at the right time. And
well, I hope so.
Thank God.
I hope so.
It would have been much worse.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Love you.
Thank you.
Well, that was quite an interview with a really great man, and we'll be back. I accomplished a lot in 2020, exposing the truth, establishing the relationship with you, working tirelessly for America. And I came to know the work and value of the people at American Hartford Gold. You see, you buy gold not only for what you know, but you buy gold for what you don't know. American Hartford Gold is the company you can trust when it comes to buying gold. They sell physical gold and silver delivered right to your door or inside of your IRA. In the precious metals industry, they are the highest rated firm in our country with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau and thousands of satisfied clients. Give them a call and tell them Rudy sent you. And be sure to ask them what I bought. And if you call them right now, they will give you up to $1,500 of free silver on your first order. Folks, these are uncertain times. The one thing you can count on to protect what you have worked so hard for is physical gold and silver. So don't wait. Call them now. Call 833-GOLD-777. That's 833-GOLD-777. Or text Rudy to 65532. Again, that's 833-GOLD-777. Or text Rudy to 65532. Welcome back to Rudy's Common Sense. And we are, as I said, interviewing people who were involved directly in that terrible day, September 11, 2001, trying to get a sense of what happened, and then some perspective on where we are now. Now I have as a guest Anthony Carbonetti. Anthony was the mayor's chief of staff, my chief of staff on that day, and for much of the time before. Tony had worked at City Hall for 7.5 years, like many of the people that we had that day. Thank goodness they were veterans, meaning they've been through, I think until September 11 happened, they thought they were through everything. I certainly did. And then when I saw the man jump out of the window, I said, well, you never are through everything. There's always something. Never be arrogant enough to think you handled everything. This is way beyond us. But Tony was an integral part of both that day and then the long, long recovery period that was equally difficult and stressful. So let me welcome him, and I'll have him tell you what happened that day and then a few of his other observations. Tony?
Mayor, as always, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. You're healthy?
I'm healthy, good. Just sent my oldest daughter off to college. My youngest is playing volleyball. Everything's good. I can't complain.
So I remember when he was a baby, so we won't go into that.
I didn't have kids on September 11th, so but thank God I lived through it, and I tell people.
Oh, that's right. Your children didn't see September.
No.
You know, there are a lot of people. You don't think there are a lot of people that never. September 11 is like Pearl Harbor,
right?
What was to us.
And when they ask about it, I say I did nothing heroic. Dumb luck, still alive, thank God. A lot of brave people that we saw that day and that we knew very well, sacrificed everything to help others. You know, and then we did what we could afterwards.
They didn't even think about it.
No. I was actually looking for you.
So tell me, the night before it rained like hell.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
I remember that.
And you probably remember one of the things I remember. Clemens was pitching for his 20th win that night, and the game got canceled.
Cats and dogs, it was raining. Yes.
So the next morning was primary day.
Primary day.
You were relieved of what you always loved, the 8 o'clock meeting.
Yes, because you had a breakfast.
We were going to meet at 4. And the reason I put it at 4 was just in case we had any primary challenges, because we had the primaries going on.
Yep.
So set the stage for us. Where were you when you woke up? What
I
kind of day was it? What were you planning to do?
At my apartment, actually. It was early in the morning for me. You know, you were already out and about, and I had a driver, Eddie Callens, and Eddie, I was actually in the shower, and Eddie would sit on my couch and watch the news, except he got a call from the police desk. He starts banging on the door. I jump out of the shower, I grab the phone, and the first call was some idiot in a twin-engine plane just rammed himself into the side of the Trade Center.
And this was from the police
desk
at City Hall.
At City Hall. So you better get down here. I said, where's the mayor? He's at his breakfast. We're trying to reach him. Fine. Get dressed quickly, jump in the car. We're heading down the FDR Drive. I'm dialing your cell, the detail cell. I get nothing. Eddie has the police radio on, and you could hear they patched through the helicopter that was flying around. That just got
the
onto
helicopter
the scene.
that was
that got onto the scene to the surveillance of the crash.
Correct.
And he starts describing a crash larger than the plane they thought hit it.
Larger than a twin-engine plane.
He said this wasn't a twin-engine plane, this was a larger plane. And we get to about Chinatown, and all of a sudden he says, there's another one coming.
Did you hear that?
No, we heard from the
No, but
helicopter.
did you hear the noise? You were close enough maybe where you could have heard.
No, but we saw what we did. We get off at Chinatown, and you could see the towers. We saw the back.
Yeah. Well, you saw what I
Okay.
saw. I was on Canal.
Yep.
So I was on Canal Street when you were there.
So we got the back end of it. We did lights and sirens. We get to City Hall. At that point, you knew it wasn't an accident. It was, I mean, at that point, every part of your body's tingling. We get to City Hall. You might remember we had a meeting scheduled that morning.
Yeah, explain that also. We had a meeting
Mrs.
at 10.
Robinson.
I think it was I was supposed to be there at 10 o'clock.
Jackie Robinson's widow.
Right.
And Pee Wee Reese's
widow.
They were doing a statue of the two of them for the new Mets stadium.
The one in
Brooklyn.
Coney Island.
Yeah. The one in Coney Island. And that was scheduled for, so I run into City Hall, and obviously there were some secretaries there and some staff members, and Lenny Cherson, who worked for me, and Lenny is one of those guys that all of a sudden he shows up in full combat gear. You don't know where it comes from, but he's always ready. And I told him, I said, shut the place down. Don't let anyone in. Lock the gates outside. Everyone in here, including the staff, get them out. We put everyone in your office, actually.
In the mayor's office.
In the mayor's office. And that vestibule outside where Beth and some of the assistants sat. And I said, round them up.
So this included the people that were in City Hall and the people that were there for the breakfast.
Correct.
Had they already started the breakfast?
No, they were starting to gather, though.
I see.
Okay. And I said, no one comes into the facility anymore. Get everyone somewhere safe. I then found out afterwards that Lenny commandeered an MTA bus and had everyone driven uptown.
So he took all those people, got them on a bus, and got them out of the danger area.
Exactly, an MTA bus, and sent them all uptown. Gary McCarty, Deputy Police Commissioner,
Yes.
he was also down there looking for, because we were all trying to find you.
Right.
And so before I left, I tried calling the White House. I reached out to Andy Card.
Mm-hmm.
They patched me through. I did not know he was in Florida. He says to me, I said, well, the mayor's going to want to speak to the president.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what's going on. I said, what kind of support do we have? He's going to have all kinds of questions. He's definitely going to want to speak to the president. Andy said, I can tell you we have 8 to 12 more planes that fit this description,
Right.
going cross country, that are off radar now. We're in the process of clearing grounding all the airplanes, but that's all I can tell you right now. I said, well, I'm going to find the mayor. Ended that conversation. Gary and I went running out of City Hall, where we knew you would be, somewhere down by the Twin Towers.
Right.
So
Now, when you walked out of City Hall, what did it look like? Was it still normal? Did it have any debris on it, or?
there was just, everyone was standing out in the street looking up. There were things flying, but nothing had gotten towards City Hall
Right,
yet.
because ultimately, the City Hall Park was covered like
With
snow.
the plume, sure.
Yeah.
And, it was shut down. The police had locked it down.
So now you're at City Hall, and where do you go?
Gary and I went running towards the Trade Center, figuring you'd definitely be down there somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
We started as you get closer, people were running away, obviously, and thankfully clearing out as much as they could. We ran into the South Tower, and I'll never forget, there were 2 battalions or of firefighters standing there awaiting orders.
Mm-hmm.
And as calm could be. And then you started hearing the thuds. And afterwards, Gary...
You started hearing the
thuds,
right,
with the bodies falling.
Right. Outside. Could you see it? At that point, had you seen any?
So afterwards, Gary actually said to me several months later, we looked up at them, and I don't remember it. And he says, no, we stopped and we saw, and I don't remember that. And
you stopped and you saw what?
We saw the bodies jumping, and
from
I
outside?
think I just blacked
from
it
the
out.
Outside?
From the outside before
because
we got into the building.
That's my most
Before we got into the building,
most
Gary's like, it was one of the things when we were approaching. He says, we look, and I think I just totally blacked it out.
When I arrived at Barclay and Church, got out. Loda and Bernie briefed me, and we walked over to the fire department command post. And on the way there, I saw a guy jump from the 100th floor, and that's what convinced me, this is way beyond anything we ever saw before. And then after that, I must have seen another 10 people jump. And I remember watching the guy at the top and saying, don't jump, because you're going to kill somebody. And a few of them hit people on the ground. So now you're inside the South Tower.
We cross, and we tell everyone we're looking for you.
Right.
And the fire department said they're setting up a headquarters on West Street.
Right.
So we cut through the side through the North Tower.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing. You see the firefighters all doing their business. We then hook up with you outside on West Street. And I remember getting there, I think Bill Feehan, Chief Feehan, had just gotten there as well.
So we met up.
I'll never forget.
Right at the basically the fire department command center, command post, outdoor command post.
And Chief Bill Feehan was just starting to brief you, and I'll never forget just how calm he was.
Well, of course, he was the
38 years.
He was the number 2 guy in the fire. Well, the number 2 civilian in the fire department, because we have civilian.
Right.
Tommy and Feehan were actually civilians, and Gansey was the chief uniformed officer. He was at the desk.
Correct. In Brooklyn, or
No,
Well,
He
no,
was-
I'm sorry.
No, he was at the desk right under the. Remember, they had a desk, and they had big
right,
plan
the
on
current
the desk.
fire commissioner was manning Brooklyn.
That's right. He was over on the other side. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So Gansey was organizing the troops,
Right.
how they go in, and Fian had just arrived to help him. Largely because Fian had even more experience than Gansey. Gansey probably 35 years, Fian 40 years. So we were in the hands of probably the best fire commanders in the country. I mean, nobody has more experience than they do.
Right. We had actually had an event at Gracie Mansion
For Downey, for Chief Downey.
2 months earlier or something.
Yes, and Chief Downey, did you see him? He was in the corner.
Yep.
He was in the corner,
The talent that was in that room.
and he had a bunch of firefighters around him. He looked like a coach, and they all went off while we were there and never came back.
But Fian said, we are getting everyone out of the buildings from the plane crashes down.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, that's what's happening right now. The guy and I'd walk through the buildings. I saw they're getting their orders, and that they send the first team up to do the analysis of what they see, and then they send more guys up to do the evacuation. I mean, they were doing what they do, and he was very calm. Mayor, we're getting them out of the buildings from
Yeah,
the
they
crashes
both told
down.
me. Both Gansey and Fian said, we'll get everybody out below the fire.
Yes.
But you know what that said to me? Everybody above the fire is dead.
But then he said rescue. I think it was 1 and 5, and he pointed. 1's in that tower, 5's, and they're going to ascertain if we can get through. So their job was to go up while everyone else was doing evacuations in the lower. Was to go and see if they could
to
get
push it
through
as
the
far as
crashes.
possible.
Right.
Both buildings had a firewall. One was a little. The first one to get hit was a little lower, and the second one was a little higher, if I recall correctly.
Correct.
They were slightly different, which is why one came down first. The question was: is there any way? Is that a complete fire, or can you get around it? And the fact is that if they could get a few people out from above. When Gansey said it to me, I looked at it. I had seen the man fall. I asked him if we could put a helicopter up. He said, absolutely not.
You asked again, yeah.
Can't do that. And he said, we can get everybody below. We'll try, but we'll get everybody below. And then I looked at the people up there, and I just had this quick feeling, my gosh, you're all going to die. Or most of you are going to die. Oh.
I think Fian, because you asked again about the helicopter, I think he said there's too much debris coming off the building, and it's too hot at the top.
Yeah, you can't land.
And then it all kind of made sense. But those people, as you said, I mean, they hit that point where they're willing to jump rather than. So it was a terrible moment, but as we've all said, the bravery of those guys saved thousands of lives.
Yeah, well, the calm way in which they did it is why we saved 3,000-4,000 people that would have died. The commission, 4 years later, concluded that it was the best rescue operation that in history, and that they saved everyone they could save, which is essentially what they said to us. What they promised us, they did.
There were private citizens, too, on floors that assisted them in clearing out floors when they would get there. There were private citizens that had been their fire commanders or whatever that we all know did heroic things. And it was just a great, as tragic as it was a great moment for humanity.
So we left there. We went to the police department,
I then told you I'd spoken to Andy Card.
Right.
And you said you wanted to speak to the president.
Right.
And I said, I told him that. I had no idea they were up in the air in Florida. Andy did not share any of that.
But you did tell me that there were a number of planes unaccounted for.
Correct. And that we were getting help.
And that we were getting help.
They were grounding everything. So I remember us trying to find, you had instructed the police department to bring their mobile command center in. At that point, there were so many fire trucks backed up. They were a few blocks away.
Right.
And someone then commandeered a trading floor.
Yes, a Merrill Lynch.
For us, which was
diagonally
across the street.
Right.
So we all went running, landlines, we all went running into there. I dialed the White House, and I got through I asked for Andy Card. They didn't tell me he wasn't there. I ended up getting a guy named Chris Hennick on the phone.
Right.
First time I'd ever spoken to Chris in my life, and we've now become very dear friends 20 years later.
But I knew Chris for quite some time.
You knew Chris from the Republican gubernatorial days.
Correct.
He was a deputy. He was Karl Rove's deputy in the White House, and I believe he said they're evacuating the White House. I'm the last guy here, and I was.
He was very, very succinct and very good and very calm, but the end result was, if you thought about it, it was pretty frightening. I mean, I asked him, "Can I speak to the president?" He said they evacuated the president. To me, that meant, because I had worked in the Reagan administration, they got him up in the plane. That means they fear an attack on the entire country, and they don't yet know where to put him.
Right. They
don't know if it's safe to bring him back to Washington, which actually was right, because there was a plane headed to Washington. Maybe it was going to take out the White House. We don't know. It could. They think the Capitol, but there's no definite proof of that. So I said, my goodness, the president is in the air. He said, we're going to evacuate the vice president. He'll call you back right away. Just be ready. He'll call you back right away. We got a call from him right away. I ran to a different room, about 2 over, pick up the phone. It's the White House secretary, Mayor Giuliani, Vice President Cheney, and before she hung up, the phone went out. The building started to shake.
Everything.
It was like an earthquake. Everybody went under, and Joe Esposito yelled out, "The tower came down." Now I'm going to ask you a question. When he said, you heard that, right?
Yeah.
When he said the tower came down, what did you think came down? The whole building or just the tower on top? Yeah.
It didn't make sense.
That's what he thought too.
Even when we spent 20 or whatever it was minutes underground and came out 100 Church Street, if you remember, there were cops coming in all bloodied, and one of them was Tibor Karekis.
Yeah, he was all cut, right?
And he said the tower fell, and I said, no, the top fell off. And he corrected me, and I thought he just, in the fog of war, just didn't see what was going on. And we were wrong, they were right.
Yeah.
It just made no sense.
We should have known it was the entire building, because the effect was devastating. Almost immediately, right outside the office we were in, which was all glass, it was totally black.
Black.
And things were going, it was like a tornado. Things were going through the street.
We tried to get out one exit, if you remember, and when you opened the door, you couldn't see.
Couldn't see where you were going.
It was like,
and people would
get
like
murky water. You couldn't see your hand.
Then we went downstairs. We couldn't find a door that would go through the park.
Yeah.
Parks. What was that? 300 Park, right?
We ended up at 100 Church.
100 Church, right?
We started. I can't remember the street. On West Street.
On Barclay. We started on Barclay.
Yeah, Barclay and
Barclay
West.
And Church. And we were here, and we went under the building, and we came out there.
We came out of 100 Church.
Until we didn't find that until the custodians.
Correct. And by then, you
door.
couldn't see. Remember, the church has the glass doors. You couldn't see outside. As people were coming in, the first time you saw them was when they opened that door.
Right. Then we got outside, and we decided we had to get a new command post, and we started debating, will it be the 1st precinct? Will it be the police department? And police department was out of power, so it couldn't be the police department. Somebody even said we can go to the backup center in Brooklyn. I said, nope, we're not going to Brooklyn. And we decided on the police academy and asked Bernie to get it ready. So he called up and got that ready. Now we were on the street. People were fleeing.
Yep. We're going north.
And then all of a sudden, John Houvain grabs me and starts running me. I stop him. I turn around and I see a big cloud in the street. Now, how did you experience that second plane coming down?
So as we were heading north, I kept turning around.
Right.
Waiting because at this point, I still didn't believe the entire tower was gone.
Right.
And I kept turning around and waiting for the dust to settle, looking for a stub. And
you wanted to see what was left
of the
how
first.
Much was left of the tower.
Yes, and that's when we were heading to where we ended up at the firehouse on Houston Street. Remember that's
Remember how John Houvain got in?
Yeah, they broke
He smashed the window over.
If you remember, Eddie because all those cars belonged to firefighters. They
Right.
just dumped them and went running
Right.
down.
Yeah, that entire firehouse was at.
Yep.
And they
Yep.
lost like 8 or 9 people.
Yeah, but I kept turning around looking for the stub, and as it started settling, I realized they were right.
Yeah,
It was
there was
gone.
nothing there. We got in, called the governor. Governor
Who was
thought
surprised that?
that we were alive.
Yeah.
The governor was surprised. That was a little eerie. And we agreed to meet at the police academy. And I think we made the single most important decision then. And that was to run our governments together.
Yep.
We decided we'd meet every day. My people, Tony, his chief of staff, my deputies, his deputies, my commissioners, his commissioners. Every day we'd sit at the same table so we didn't have to go through this New York to Albany, Albany to Washington, Washington back to Albany. And then Bush gave us FEMA.
But something you said earlier also was a great benefit to us, which is having 7.5 years on the job.
Oh my God.
You
yeah.
know which
Yes.
agencies have which assets and bodies, and it's not just personnel, it's equipment, it's technology, and people came to those meetings. There was the first meeting definitely with, here are the assets I have. And if you
Right.
remember, one of the first things you did was not only called all active police on fire, but the corrections officers went on a double shift. I don't think the prisoners, the inmates got their hour of rec time that day, but the corrections guys stayed on and they came down to work the makeshift morgue.
Mm-hmm.
It was just moving bodies around, and everybody, sat at the table. They knew what you needed, which was, what assets do you have? The housing authority surprisingly had the most number of beams, the lights. Remember, they were able to come down and light up
Right.
Ground Zero at night, because for some reason the housing authority has all these, but the commissioners walked in knowing that we needed to know what assets.
Yeah, they knew
have.
where to get the generator to keep it lit
Yep.
24 hours a day from General Electric.
But that came from
Years of knowledge.
years of doing these mock drills, of having these morning meetings, of questioning, why do you have this? What do you do with, and all of them working together. And, I years afterwards, when I would meet a chief of staff or a governor, I would say, the greatest thing that happened to us was having this cohesive unit that had a dialogue beforehand.
Correct.
You did not keep commissioners away from each other. There weren't fiefdoms. Everyone understood it was one
I
administration.
thought it was remarkable how the state and the city worked together also.
Yeah, that
Almost as if we were the same
exactly.
government.
Everyone bent over backwards to help, and that was the greatest time. You saw all of New York City. How many people stood online to give blood at every hospital?
How many flags? When Bush was driving up, people yelling and screaming how much they loved him. So now, Tony, let's go to today. Would that happen today? If the, God forbid, the same thing happened, would the flags come out, would the patriotism emerge?
What bothers me about our politics today is, I tell the story about the 7-year-old version of me. I was the little Yankee fan from East Harlem. And I wasn't just a Yankee fan. I hated the Red Sox. Everything about Boston I hated, because the Yankees were my life. 11 years later, I'm a freshman at Boston University. I'm sitting at Fenway Park with a lifelong Red Sox fan, having a beer and a laugh, and baseball's bigger than, because you don't know any better. And I think our politics today are the 7-year-old version of me. It's not enough to like your team. You have to hate the other side. And I think that's bad. I think we've become a society that doesn't see the other side enough.
Well, you did a great job, Tony.
Thank you.
You were a great chief
you
of
did a
staff.
wonderful job.
You were a great chief of staff in general, but you were a real hero during that period. You just worked your backside off, and
We all,
you never
like I said,
stopped.
you had prepared all of us for that day,
Yeah,
not
the
knowing you were preparing us for that
fact
day.
that you and the people around you knew the city as well as you did. If that was our 4th or 5th month in office, it'd have been different.
very very different.
I've always admired Bush because he was a rookie and he handled it really, really well.
Yeah.
I also think that the criticism of him not being there, first of all, he wasn't there because he's the president of the United States. And that's what we do. No president would have been there.
Right.
And at a moment like that, the president cannot overrule the Secret Service. He can't. Because the president, we can't lose the president in the middle of a
victory.
Imagine,
that would have
imagine
been
they
their
killed our
ultimate
president,
victory.
whoever he is.
That would have been their ultimate victory.
But thank you. Great job.
Thank you.
My love to the family.
Love you. Thank you.
Thank you.